All right, everybody, welcome on into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Eric Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know about today, the last day of regular season action for the KBO. Well, meaningful action, I'll put it that way, since we do have a game tomorrow, Dinos Tigers, which doesn't really matter for anything except for Pride. But speaking of outside of Pride, we have actual playoff baseball, which should be very exciting coming up very soon. We'll give you the schedule for that coming out on Twitter, so be sure to follow us on RotoWire KBO for our postseason outlook. Check out the website as well, rotowire.com/free KBO for more stats and info. And yeah, let's dive right into it. Playoff picture, Eric. You put up this graphic looking at all the scenarios of what could happen tonight/tomorrow morning with these games. What do you see as most likely? Are the Wiz pretty much secured in that number 2 spot with them being with most scenarios that they're going to probably have it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the picks soon, but the Wiz and Twins are playing a couple of non-contenders. In fact, they're playing the two worst teams in the league in the Eagles and Wyverns. So certainly if things go as expected, I would expect to see the Wiz and Twins as the second and third seeds. And as a reminder for people just taking up the KBO now, 5 teams make the playoffs in the KBO, and their playoffs kind of go sequentially with only one series at a time. 4 plays 5 in a best of 3, with the 4 seed getting a 1-game advantage to reward them for the better regular season. The winner of that plays 3 in a 5-game series. Winner of that plays 2 in a 7-game series, and winner of that plays the regular season champion, who in this case is the Dinos. They will have just been sitting at home for a few weeks waiting for the rest of the teams to beat each other up to join them. So every spot you finish higher in the playoffs is worth, at minimum, a huge advantage in your playoff round, and possibly an entire bye or 2. So if you look at the Heroes, they could finish as high as second in the scenario where both the Wiz and Twins choke and the Heroes beat the Bears. That would be that second to last scenario there. But if they lose to the Bears, they're locked into the 5 seed, and they'd have to beat somebody 2 games in a row just to advance to the next round. And then they'd still have 2 more rounds after that. So tonight's game for the Heroes in particular is huge. They have the biggest variance here. They can finish in any of the 4 spots. But pretty much everyone has plenty on the line here. Only the Heroes and Bears can finish 5th, but all 4 teams could wind up in that wild card round if results don't go their way tonight. It's quite an exciting finish here. It's 4 teams separated by, I believe it's a game and a half. So it's, we got quite lucky to have so many meaningful games at the end here.
Indeed, the hashtag KBO is wild is very true tonight. As you see, Heroes could be anywhere. We could see Addison Russell be one series win away from being in the Korean series, or having to fight through all teams to get there. So a lot of chaos for sure. One last thing, we do have a question before we dive into the picks, is about Changmoku and Bumso building up their pitch count. Any initial thoughts on that, Eric, as the Dinos won't be playing after tomorrow for 2 days, wherever you are, for a while. And I imagine that they're going to be resting for quite a bit.
Right, couple guys coming off injuries. Changmoku returning from forearm issues that kept him out for half the season or so. He returned on Sunday to pitch 4 outs of relief, just 19 pitches. My general rule is you expect 15 to 20 pitch increase from outing to outing for a guy building back from injury, which is roughly an inning or so, depending on how smooth that inning is. So we'll get into it a bit more in the individual game breakdowns here, but since Koo went an inning and a third last time, I would think he's maximum 3 innings. Bumsoo Kim is coming back from hip issues, I believe it was, that kept him out since late July. He's been building up in the Futures League for the Eagles. He's topped out at 3 2/3 innings there, so maybe 4 2/3, 5 innings if everything goes well for him against the Wiz, which there's no guarantee it will be. So definitely workload restrictions for both those guys, more significant for Changmoku.
Yeah, definitely going to be big for Changmoku, who we will get to in a bit as we dive into our picks and game breakdowns here, starting with more of a warm-up matchup here. 2 non-playoff teams, the Kia Tigers and the Lotte Giants. But we do have 2 foreign imports on the mound, Drew Gagnon and Adrian Sampson. Sampson, I'll start with him. he is ending the season like he started it, on a bad note. 10 earned runs in his last 3 starts, and he had 11 earned runs in his first 3 starts of the year. What are we thinking for Sampson tonight against the Kia Tigers team, who, I'll say it like this, had a disappointing year?
Yeah, they were in the playoff race for much of the season, although they didn't finish in the playoffs last year. So from that perspective, not a disappointment, though they won it all just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years. Definitely did not take the step back to the heights with their new American manager, Matt Williams, this season. But they're in the hunt. I mean, they're going to finish above 500, I guess 500 or above if they lose their last 2 here. Giants can't finish 500, so if that was motivator, they can't quite do that. Still an impressive season given that they were last in the league last year. As for Sampson, yeah, it's a bit too bad to see him falling off again. It seemed like he was one of those guys that was just taking a while to adjust to the league, pretty understandably. He lost his dad, I think, to cancer right before the start of the season, or even right after. He missed the very beginning of the year due to quarantine surrounding going home to be with his dad, which pretty understandably would throw you off as you're starting a new job in the middle of a pandemic across the ocean. And he had really settled in to be a decent enough starter for most of the second half of the year. He had a stretch of 8 out of 9 starts where he allowed 3 or fewer earned runs, but that's since come to an end. Two bad starts in a row here, total of 10 runs in 9 2/3 innings, 18 hits. So pretty unimpressive recent outings. When he's at his best, he's been fine, but not dominant. He's gotten his strikeout rate up to 17.2%, which is close to league average, actually. Walking 7.2% is better than league average. So his ERA doesn't necessarily show it, but he's a fine enough arm that the Giants shouldn't be embarrassed to throw out there by any means. But he's not one of the dominant foreign starters that you'd hope to get with only 2 spots dedicated to those guys.
Yeah, I think you could probably say about the same thing for Gagnon. He looked like maybe he could have that star potential earlier in the season. Recently, he's been decent. We're looking at 4 of his last 6. He's had 2 earned runs, but that last one came against Hanwha. So I don't know how much credit you really give him for that outing. And one interesting note, he does have 2 straight starts with exactly 102 pitches. One time he went 5 innings, but another time he went almost 7. So not sure if that's a big factor. What do we make of Gagnon's outing tonight?
Wow, look at every single start on the screen there is between 102 or 100 and 106. It seems like they have a target pitch count for him almost regardless of how many runs he's giving up, and he seems to hit it every single time. He mostly has done well for them. He had a run of 7 straight starts from late August through early October with no more than 2 earned runs allowed, but then had a couple shaky starts there against the Wyverns and Twins before a good start out last time, as you mentioned, against the Eagles. On the whole, he's got a pretty high strikeout rate. 23.1% is one of the better strikeout rates in the league, but he walks 10.6% of opposing batters. Early in the year, he was a high strikeout, low walk guy who wasn't necessarily getting great results, so I thought that things would really turn around for him. But instead, what happened is that his strikeout and walk numbers became a little bit less impressive. But on the whole, I don't think he can be particularly disappointed with this season. I think he's pitched well enough, kept the Tigers in the game most of his outings. And again, that strikeout rate, 23.1%. It's interesting because in his brief MLB time, 35 2/3 innings, strikeout rate of just 14.5%. So the step down in talent level seems to have helped him, more than you'd expect there. So maybe he's figured out at least something, although not necessarily enough that you'd say he's definitely going to return to MLB and be a weapon for somebody next year.
Yeah, definitely not on the top of the list of guys returning potentially to Major League Baseball this offseason. Maybe another year or two in Korea could do him well. In terms of the line for this one, where it is, here it is. Total set at 9.5. The Tigers are favored in this one. Tigers, they scored 4 runs per game over their last 3. Lotte, even worse than that, 2 runs per game. The Tigers do play tomorrow. Not sure if that factors into it at all, but what are we thinking at in terms of the total and the pick?
Right. Unfortunately, this is 2 teams that are completely out of the race at this point. So there's more randomness, I think, than with most of the other games on the slate here. If one of them just so happens to decide that they're benching a ton of guys or pulling them all out after the third inning or something, hard to tell from whatever it is, 9 hours in advance of game time. But if we expect close to the true lineups from both teams, it's going to be a tight one. I think Gagnon is better than Sampson, not by a huge amount, but I think over the course of the year, been more reliable, higher strikeout guy. He's had better highs. They both had some pretty mediocre lows, but when Gagnon's on, I think he's done better than Sampson has. So I'd lean his way. 9.5 is a pretty well set over under for two mediocre lineups against two pretty good pitchers. I'm going to side with the under here, having some faith in Gagnon and a decent amount of faith in Sampson against two, again, unimpressive lineups. And there's no reason to believe that they're going to pull these pitchers extra early to give innings to relievers. They could well do that, but assuming that doesn't happen, I think these two guys can go 6-7 innings and keep the score low enough until they hand things over to the bullpen.
Yeah, so we got the Kia Tigers and the under 9.5. As Barry notes, Sampson can be very inconsistent at times, so we'll see what he does tonight in his last start of the year. Moving over to now the big game, going from a game that does not matter to one that matters a whole lot. We got the Heroes and the Bears. The Joker, Eric Jokic, facing off against the Deuce and Bear, Raul Alcantara, who just seems to consistently win time after time with them. First, looking at Jokic, looking at his last line, you think, okay, 2 earned runs, 7 hits, no walks, pretty solid, right? Then you see he actually gave up 5 runs in total in over 2 1/3 innings, which is not a lot. He's a starter, should be going 8, and he only had 1 strikeout. So I don't know what we say with here. A must-win game, or closest thing to it. They're still in the playoffs, but I don't know what we make of Jokic, who was, MVP level conversations earlier this season. What's going on with Eric Jokic right now?
Right, and there's still a pretty strong case for him as the best pitcher this season. If you're particularly high on ERA, he is way ahead of everybody there. An ERA of 2.10 is 0.4 runs better than anybody else in the league. As 104 whip is 0.02 behind Dan Straley and Aaron Brooks. So even with really it's a couple shaky outings there. As you mentioned, quite poor against the Bears last time out. Against the Wiz, the time before that, he fails to finish the 5th inning. Gives up 3 total runs on 7 hits, only one of them earned, but still not an impressive outing by any means. He did battle minor shoulder issues, but those were back in August, and he seemed to be fully past them. Over his 5 starts prior to these last 2, he had an ERA of 109 and a whip of 082. So didn't really seem to be nagging him, that issue that popped up in August. It's possible it's come back a bit, although he said on the KBO broadcast this morning on ESPN that he was past his issues. Obviously, what pitcher has ever said, nah, I'm still hurt.
I'm hurting, yeah.
Probably going to have a bad game today. Don't have any faith in me. Wish I wasn't here. That's generally not how things go, so I wouldn't put a ton of stock in that, but at least he said it. So I have to say I'm at least mildly concerned. I'd be less concerned with those 2 mediocre outings if he'd had no injury issues all year. But it's two at least minor worries. I wouldn't necessarily go into this treating this as the Eric Jokic that we're totally used to. Although, again, if he comes out there and gives up 1 run in 8 innings, I wouldn't be surprised either. But I'm a lot less confident that that's going to happen than I usually am. But again, I usually am so confident in him. So being a lot less, I still think he's pretty good.
Yeah, so I'll see what we get from him tonight. Could be anything. Alcantara, he seems to be pretty consistent in general, just 3 earned runs over his last 19 innings pitched. He did, though, have his highest walk total since early September. Anything a little worrisome there? Not as much as Jokic, I'd imagine, but still has got to be worth something.
Yeah, although, I mean, that walk total is just 3. He's been excellent in terms of avoiding walks this season, just a 4.3% walk rate. That's actually right where Eric Jokic's is at 4.2%. The difference between the two is despite Jokic having the better ERA, he strikes out a pretty solid 19.4% of opposing batters, but Raul Alcantara is at 25.4%, a full 6 percentage points better, right up there with the top qualified starters in the league. So excellent strikeout rate and walk rate backing up very strong ERA and whip. He's right there in the conversation as top pitcher in the league. I think it's him and Jokic, Dan Straley, among the guys that have been healthy all year. Aaron Brooks, you throw in that group too. Maybe one or two more, but I think Alcantara is firmly part of that. It's interesting because he pitched in the KBO for the Wiz last year and was pretty mediocre. 4 ERA is fine, but remember the ball was de-juiced last year, so it's even more mediocre than it looks, and he did not have the same strikeout numbers at all, but he's figured out something this year. Really strong underlying numbers backing up really strong surface numbers. And he's pitching as well as ever these days, just 3 total earned runs in his last 4 starts, an ERA of 104, a whip of 081 over those 4. So this is definitely the guy the Bears want to have on the mound in the most important game of the regular season. And again, like we showed at the beginning, there's huge stakes here. A win for the Bears, and they're guaranteed to be above the Heroes, which means at worst, they'll be the 4 seed and get that 1-game advantage in the 3-game wild card playoff. In that case, it would essentially, this game functions as game 1 of that 3-game series. There are scenarios where a win even gets them a bye, but they have a ton of motivation to win tonight. Again, huge playoff implications, but they have the guy on the mound to do it.
Definitely, they're going to want him out there, and he's out there tonight. For this game, we got the total set at 7.5 because these guys are aces, even if it doesn't look like it for Jokic at the moment. 7.5 is very low for the KBO, especially when you have the Deuce and Bears offense involved. And looks like, I know, who would you give the edge to here? I want to say the Bears, but if Jokic does come through in the way he can, I might give it to the Heroes.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Bears just because Alcantara has been reliable lately. If this was, again, just 2 weeks ago, it might be enough for me to go with the Heroes. But, again, two shaky starts from Jokic. I think he's been shaky at times in the past against the Bears, which is a bit of a surprise given how heavily left-handed the Bears are, but he has not done great against them. Obviously, I guess his last start was against the Bears. He's got some good ones in there, but he has 6 earned runs against him back in late July. So that was actually his worst start by a significant amount, at least the ones I'm seeing. So he's had struggles against them in the past. He's been a little bit shaky his last 2. He's still Eric Jokic, so I'd be picking him against most pitchers in the league, but not Alcantara.
All right, that's what we're looking at in terms of the pick, going with the Bears. And with the total, Deucin scored 9 runs their last time out. Kiwoom scored 6, but that hasn't been for a while. They played on the 23rd. Do you think that rest helps them or maybe hurts them with the low total?
I guess their swings could be a little bit off since they've had so long to rest. It depends on how good their practices have been, I guess, with their new coach, because they fired their old one, presumably resigned with like 8 games left in the year. We'll see. Maybe he's been dramatically improving everyone over the past week. Kind of doubt it. It's a real low total, but man, Alcantara is so good, and so is Jokic. It feels a bit weird picking the under on 7.5, but I think it feels even stranger picking the over with these two. So I am going to go under here. Though it's a pretty tight one. Would understand picks in the other direction for sure.
Yes, always dangerous with the under in the KBO, but could have asked for a better pitching matchup. Well, maybe with Jokic doing a little better recently, but outside that, one of the best matchups we've seen all season. Moving on, we have the KT Wiz against the Hanwha Eagles. A big one again for the Wiz, not for the Eagles. That's only pride. But the Wiz, they can secure that number 2 seed, that bye up into the semifinals. And they got Jasong Bay on the mound. He's been strong, 6 innings, 1 earned run and 4 hits in his last start. That only 1 run came from a solo home run, and it was his first solo home run given up since September 8th. So kind of in a rhythm against the Eagles. They did dominate them yesterday, too. I would think it'd have to be all whiz on this one.
Yeah, I've been looking over the last 2 weeks. There's been 16 games involving playoff teams versus non-playoff teams. I think not everything was totally clinched at the start of those 2 weeks, but it was quite close. I think the Bears would have needed to all but lose out with the Tigers all but winning out for any shakeups to happen. So in these 2 weeks, playoff teams are 12-4 against non-playoff teams, so pretty much taking care of business. And 2 of those losses have been from the Dinos, who have had the number 1 seed locked up. So seems like these games are going as you'd expect, with the team that has something still to play for winning it most of the time. So it's what I'm going to expect here too. Although I don't have a ton of confidence in Jasong Bay. He's one of those guys that seems to be skating by with low earned run totals, despite the peripherals that don't match up at all. More walks than strikeouts in 4 straight starts. He's struck out more than he walked just once in his last 12. It has been working for him, though. 8 straight starts with 2 or fewer earned runs, despite, again, pretty shaky numbers as you scroll to the right on that box there. Really just not close to the kind of numbers you'd expect from a guy, giving up 0, 1, or 2 earned runs every time. And some of those starts, are 2 earned runs in 3 1/3 innings. So I shouldn't be acting as if he's been dominant lately. But he really hasn't been bad. But just it's been all year, though, that he's had very mediocre or worse strikeout to walk ratio. He only has 3 more strikeouts than walks on the season, a 14.2% strikeout rate against a 13.7% walk rate. So way too many base runners and doesn't put guys away. Again, ERA is just over 4, so it's worked for him. And he was good last year, ERA of 3.76, but his strikeout and walk rates were both significantly better. He struck out about 2% more and walked about 4% fewer. So he seemingly deserved pretty decent numbers last year. And it doesn't look like he's got, the sort of delivery that should confuse everybody and make him way outperform his peripherals like this. So I would count myself pretty skeptical of his recent performance, but he's playing an already eliminated Eagles team. So I don't think he has to be that good to get the win here.
All right, so not a big believer in Bay. It does look better that he's going to secure the victory tonight when you consider the opposing pitcher he's facing, Kim. He's a player, 7 earned runs in 2 innings his last time out. He did have a 9 strikeout game, 2 starts ago, but since he's just had 9 walks against 5 strikeouts. So quickly, anything of note for Kim, or is this just a standard Hanwha Eagles, not a great player?
Yeah, and again, he was the guy we talked about earlier where he's been out since late July with a hip issue. He was not good before the injury, was a reliever for part of the year, then made 7 starts with a 5.88 ERA, a 1.69 whip. He does have a pretty good strikeout rate. That's the one thing you can say for him. 20.6% strikeout rate is a few ticks above league average, but it's also only a few ticks above his walk rate. 15.6% walk rate is nearly double what you're looking for. And he doesn't have a track record of success either. He's got a career ERA of 6.18. His career best before this year was 5.68. He's going to set a new career best unless he absolutely blows up today, but it's not going to be a particularly good one. So no reason to have any real faith in Bum-Soo Kim here, and recent injury history makes me even more worried about him. If we had DFS today, maybe he's a super cheap guy where you hope he gets a few strikeouts, but that's still down on DraftKings, so there's pretty much no reason to have much interest in him.
Yeah, and the total is actually kind of low, 9.5, when you consider him being the pitcher. Bay has actually been decent, but you're not a huge believer, so maybe that over could have a big opportunity. Wiz big favorites in this one, as they do have Mel Rojas Jr. offensively, and they're the Wiz going to be the number 2 seed most likely with this victory. You're going to go with the Wiz or go with that over?
Yep, pretty easy whiz. They have something to play for. They have a way better lineup, and they probably have a better pitcher, even if their pitcher's not great. And definitely over. I could see the Wiz hitting it themselves, and I think the Eagles could even help them. Brandon Barnes has at least shown something recently. 6 multi-hit games in his last 9. Also, we should mention the Mel Rojas Triple Crown watch. He's got homers and RBI in the bag. But he's trailing Hyungwoo Choi of the Tigers by 4 points in batting average. He's also tied with Asap San of the Giants. So real tight one. A 3-hit day for Rojas probably secures it unless Hyungwoo Choi does the same. So definitely plenty to play for him in particular, in addition to the rest of the Wiz here.
And in addition, Brandon Barnes didn't see he had have some good leadership, little veteran leadership on KBO Twitter. At least there's something else to note. Going with the Wiz and the over 9.5 in this one. Moving on, we have the LG Twins and the SK Wyverns Twins playoff team against a non-playoff team. The Twins, they send a former first overall pick. The only problem there is he's from 2008, so nothing crazy. Only 1 walk in his last 3 starts, though, but only 3 strikeouts over his last 2. Can't imagine you're a big fan of those walk to strikeout numbers.
No, although on the whole, he's actually been quite good in those categories. 20.8% strikeout rate against a 6.9% walk rate on the season, both quite strong marks. He's a guy who has been a reliever since 2008. He broke into the league and started some games, but hadn't started a single game since then until this year. They've been managing him very carefully. They often sent him down between starts. I think he only has, 18 starts on the year or so. But it seemed to have worked, judging by his overall numbers. And he hasn't really faded down the stretch either. He had a streak of 5 straight quality starts, a 1.78 ERA and a 1.02 WHIP over that stretch until his last one out against the Dinos was poor. But on the whole, he's been reliable all year and pretty good until his very last outing. So I would have plenty of faith in him against a Wyverns team that has looked like they've given up for quite some time at this point.
Yes, they have. Wyverns were borderline that bad Eagles category, as they were going to be the worst team. By the regular season, we thought maybe they'd be at the bottom, but the Eagles kind of took over that moniker. The Wyverns tonight don't look like they have a good chance. Yoon has a 0 ERA, so that's worth maybe a little optimism, but it is in just 3 innings pitched this season, and he hasn't thrown more than 17 pitches in any of those. Bullpen day for the Wyverns, is that just bad news for them?
Yeah, so it looks like, based on the reports I was seeing, Hee-Seng Yoon here is going to retire after the game. He's a 35-year-old veteran, been with the team since 2004. They're giving him one last quote-unquote start, but I think he's going to throw to one batter and then get his standing ovation and retire before turning it over to Jung-Hoon Park, who's been an okay enough starter for the Wyverns, one of their better ones, but that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. Mediocre numbers on the year. He's coming off a couple quality starts, but just 2 strikeouts against 5 walks in the last one. And he does, again, have decent strikeout numbers on the season, 21.1%, but against a 12.3% walk rate. Too many batters on the bases. So in general, he's been mediocre enough, but against a Twins team that has plenty to play for. They may even be getting Roberto Ramos back too from his ankle issues. There's talk he could play tonight. Also on Twins injury news, Tyler Wilson is expected to throw up to 3 rehab innings in it was called a practice game against the Bears, some sort of scrimmage over the weekend. Certainly bodes well for the Twins getting both of those guys back soon. I don't think the Twins need Roberto Ramos tonight, but that would tilt things even further in their favor here.
Things looking up for the most likely number 3 seed in the playoffs here, potentially number 2. So a lot of good factors there, Barry, with some interesting notes as well. In terms of offense and the total here, set at 10.5. LG put up 6 their last time out, and the Wyverns were shut out their last time out. But do note the Twins did lose was in extras to Hanwha, I believe. So what are we thinking? Easy Twins and easy over?
Yeah, definitely easy Twins. Again, see no real reason to pick against the teams that have something to play for here. I will go over. I'm enough of a believer in this Twins lineup. I do think Chan Hyun Jung is pretty good, though. I wouldn't expect much from a pretty weak Wyverns offense. So if this ends up 8-2 and hits the under, I guess I'm not terribly surprised. But I think there's enough with the Twins here. I don't think Jung Hoon Park is anything to be scared of. So slight lean to the over, pretty strong lean towards the Twins.
All right, that's our second to last game. Last game here is one that does not have any playoff implications, as we have the Dinos facing off against the Lions. But this does have big Korean series implications, as we have Chang Mo-koo on the mound. 19 pitches his last time out in relief, one strikeout among his stats in that one. Could we see him going longer? I mean, they're not going to have a chance for him to throw in a meaningful game until the Super Bowl of the KBO. What are you expecting from Chang Mo-koo here?
Yeah, again, you generally expect people to build up by 15 to 20-ish pitches, and he's throwing on normal rest, having just thrown on Sunday. So I no reason to expect him to go more than maybe 3 innings, 30, 35, maybe 40 pitches. That's maybe 2 1/3 innings, 2 2/3, maybe 3 if he pitches particularly well. It's worth noting his previous outing was completely clean. 4 outs, 1 strikeout, 0 base runners. So there's no signs of lingering worries there. Man, though, if they could just get him back to something close to what he was early in the year, there was nobody around him on the leaderboards when he went down with injury. He's got an ERA of 1.53, a whip of 0.80, 30.9% strikeout rate. I think Dan Straley is best among qualified starters. Last I checked, he was around 26-ish%, 25, 26. So Koo was in another league. He doesn't walk guys either, just 5.2% walk rate. Just phenomenal run from him to start the year. It was real shame to see him go down with forearm issues. I don't expect him to pitch again long enough that we should expect the Dinos to have a shutout here. They'll probably turn it over to whoever they feel like giving one more opportunity to in the bullpen. Game does not matter to their standings at all, and they have, again, a couple weeks at least until they have to pitch again. So it's a bit tough to predict what direction things will go to there. They do. It's them that has the game against the Tigers on Saturday. So they're not necessarily in full last game of the season mode. Maybe that keeps some of their better players in a bit longer. So that adds a ton of uncertainty to it, unfortunately, because if this was ordinary Chang Mo-koo against the Lions, it would be one of the easier picks of the season for sure.
Yes, not looking anywhere near normal, but there is some room for optimism. His last 4 starts before going down with injury, all 7 innings. So he definitely can go that distance. If he physically can, because of health tonight, it's a different question, but he is capable of that at maximum capacity. Turning our attention over to the Lions starter, Taein Wan. He's got some boom or bust potential. But he had 7 innings, 1 run on 5 hits against the Wiz. But then before that, 6 innings, 6 runs, 10 hits against the Wyverns. What do we make of this guy?
Yeah, when he's on, he's somewhat mediocre in his 4 starts in October, 4.30 ERA and a 1.61 whip. Suggests he's not necessarily on at the moment. And his 6 starts before then, stretching from late August through the end of September, had an ERA of 9.24. So when he's off, things are quite scary. Pitching in Daegu Samsung Lions Park, the most hitter-friendly park in the league, against the league's best lineup. Doesn't bode well for him, I wouldn't think. He's not terrible, but I don't think he's good enough to shut down the Dinos. Again, assuming they care and assuming most of their top starters are in. Seems like they're giving a rest to 1 or 2 of their top guys in most of their recent games, but they're not, rotating the lineup wholesale. Aaron Altair sat a couple games ago, but Sungbum Na and Yuji Yang have started most of the games since they've clinched. So I would expect something close-ish to full strength here, which should be definitely enough to get the job done against one.
That's what we're looking at with the pitchers. Total set 10.5. Offensively, Dinos, they had 18 runs their last 2 times out in total. But they did lose on Tuesday when they faced off against the Lions 12-2 in an upset that our very own Eric Halterman, of course, predicted. Going very bold against the Dinos, I got to say. You're going to do it again? You got the confidence to pick against Chang-Mo Koo if he's only going 2 innings tonight?
Yeah, I mean, last time it's because the Lions had their best Korean starter, Jae-Hyung Choi, on the mound, and he did do quite well. I don't think Taiwan is enough to get the job done, even against the Dinos lineup that has no particular reason to care. So I am going to side Dinos. I think that line seems like it might be a little bit more confident than anyone should be in a game that, again, has no implications for anyone. So I think that adds a fair amount of randomness to the situation that isn't necessarily reflected there. Then for the over-under, 10.5 is quite high for a game that has Chang-Mo Koo in it, but I don't think it'll have Chang-Mo Koo in it for very long, and then I don't think it'll necessarily have appearances by all the Dinos' highest leverage relievers. So I am actually going to go over despite Chang-Mo Koo, because, again, I would expect at least 6 innings of Dinos relievers, not necessarily the best ones. And, hey, this Dinos lineup can hit that over in the most hitter-friendly park in the league all by themselves. So lean over there.
All right, looking at the over 10.5 and the Dinos. And, of course, that's all 5 games. I haven't seen a 5-game slate in a while just because we've been in the makeup rainout mode. But we have all 5. Have a lot of choices here. The top 3 picks. So people want to know what is the most boom top 3 picks. We got a lot here. What are we thinking? Yeah. Maybe we got a parlay last regular season. Last time we're going to have multiple games. Eric, what do you got for us, the top picks?
So I think the 2 easy ones are the ones where you have a team with something to play for against a team with nothing to play for, who also happens to be very bad. So that's going to be pretty easy. Twins over Wyverns. I'll go with them as number 1 because I have some faith in Shan-Hyung Jung, the Twins starter. I'll go for number 2 is going to be Wiz over Eagles. Again, same deal. Wiz have playoff seeding to play for. Eagles have been eliminated for something like 5 months. Not sure on the exact date, but it's been a while. A little bit shakier starter there for the Wiz in Jasong Bae. Hasn't been giving up runs, but it really looks like he should be. So that's number 2 for me. I see a comment for the NC as number 3, which makes sense in talent reasons. But I'm a little bit nervous when you've got, again, it's 2 teams with nothing to play for. So there's some randomness there. I can see picking that as the 3rd one. But I might stay away. The Heroes Bears is real close. I really like both pitchers, but, man, they set quite an accurately low over-under there at 7.5. So I don't necessarily feel comfortable throwing that as one of the top 3. So with that in mind, I might be leaning towards I just think that those top 2 are way ahead of the rest. Wiz Eagles over, I think, is the pick that I'm 3rd most confident in. It's pretty low over-under for 2 pitchers that I would consider shaky at best. I think that only makes sense if you fully buy Jasong Bae at his ERA. I don't fully buy him at his ERA, so I think even a bad Eagles lineup could score some, and I think the Wiz could hit 10 against Bum-Soo Kim and whoever else follows him out of the Eagles pen. So that's going to be number 3 for me. Definitely Dinos in consideration, but again, I get nervous when no team has reason to care. So I'm a little bit more likely to stay away from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, who would have thunk we would say Dinos, Lions, Chang-Mo Koo is starting. Who are you going to take? Well, let's stay off it. Well, that's where we're at. That's how wild the KBO season has been. Barry, he's loving it. Eric breaking it all down. Staying away from those aces. It is a low total, but you don't know what's going to happen with Jokic and his recent performance. And that's what we're looking at. LG Twins, KT Wiz, and then the KT Hanwha over 9.5. I like Jasong Bay. He gets the job done, but I understand with peripherals maybe aren't looking like the best option, so we're taking that over. And yeah, thank you guys. That's it for the regular season. We got one more. Well, there's a game tomorrow, but it does not matter. After these tomorrow, it's crazy with the times. I'm still not used to it. But we have one last Dinos Tigers, which does not mean anything outside Pride on Saturday. And then we are into the wild card round. We will let you know what we're doing there. We're thinking a show at the beginning of each series, so that could be coming up very soon. Be sure to follow us on RotoWire at RotoWire KBO for all that updates and info. Thank you guys for sticking around for the entire regular season. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to the playoffs.
Yeah, again, sincere thank you to everybody who's been with us. It's been fun getting into league for its own sake, but wouldn't be nearly as fun without people to talk to about it. Hope to see you back to the playoffs. We'll definitely have some sort of content here. I'm planning on having some sort of written playoff preview as well coming up before the start of the wild card round. So, thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.